This is part 5 of Memory Lane Perspective. I'm going to try and put some complementary colours into these awnings based on colour theory from the colour wheel. So if I have an orange awning here, I'm going to put a blue-green one next to it, which I think might be appropriate for a greengrocer. So that's cerulean blue and very little of yellow, cadmium yellow. Not too much, more cerulean blue and a little bit of ultramarine as well. We'll make it a kind of deeper blue-green colour, which looks like that on paper. Hopefully that will be a good colour to have next to this orange blind. So that would be a deeper blue. Turn it just a little bit this way so it's better for the movement of my hand. It's the cerulean blue and a little bit of cadmium yellow and some ultramarine. Just trying to get that sort of down to that edge. Keep the point of the brush in contact up to this edge. So I'm going to dilute the colour a little bit in the jar, in the water, and try and blend those one into the other. Dilute the colour again on the jar, on water, and see if I can make that graduate upwards a little bit. So the colour in theory is a little more intense at the base here, and then just by running the colour out, drying the brush a little bit, the object is to try and make that colour disperse. And if I tilt it a little this way, I'm hoping that will help it. The characteristic of the cerulean is granulation, so that will granulate a bit more than the orange blind has. Let's see if I can make a more vibrant colour for the next one. Permanent rose, the colour I haven't used so far. Permanent rose, and so magenta would be permanent rose and a little bit of ultramarine. It's a magenta colour, something like that. And a smaller brush, so on paper, that looks like that. And this further blind, I can zoom into it, would be deeper magenta colour. Lower down, slightly paler higher up. This is a good excuse to practice graduated washes, or graduating washes, and then a little more dilute still, higher up. Less brushing with that, the better. Let's make it a bit, having said that, I'm going to put something in there. So what could go opposite magenta, purple, would be yellow. But these blinds that are further away would be lighter still, generally. But yellow is a fairly weak colour, so it isn't easy to make it strong. So that's already going to dry lighter, I think. And then paler towards the top. And the sort of colours that work better in the distance would be cool colours. So all these blue influenced colours in the colour wheel, the blue greens and the blue violets, these ones, they would work well in the distance. And So next to the yellow blind, this is a matter of choice, it's a matter of individual choice what you put, how the order that you make these. Blue, I'm going to have ultramarine. Ultramarine, and dilute that. Just a little bit of water, a little bit more water. I'll try and take some out of that. It's supposed to be paler in the distance. And darker lower down on the awning, but lighter higher up. So a bit of lifting out, a bit of redistribution there, but generally lighter lower down. So purple, blue, violet might be further, if I add a bit more blue violet in the most distant. That's blue violet, that's got a bit more blue with the pink to make a blue violet, and diluted. So I'll make that the last one. You have different blues and different reds throughout this colour, the colour choices. So I'm deliberately making that lighter farther away. But still there's some colour there, you can just about see it. So a different blue would be cerulean. I'll make the next one sky blue, so cerulean blue, and then fade that higher up. That's quite fiddly work for watercolour. You've got to use a smaller brush, like a 2 or a 3, to make that work. So it's the juxtaposition of colour, one colour set against another colour, that should make that. Larger areas, larger shapes to paint. This car might be one. I think just paint with a simple single wash or single colour. And by mixing ultramarine and cerulean blue, you can make a cobalt blue, something like this. Because the building's quite orange and there is quite a lot of red colours around, I think painting the car in a blue complements that. So it's the relationship of colours, one colour next to another. So I'm not attempting to put shadow onto this, but just paint it in a single wash of flat colour, hopefully, cerulean blue and ultramarine, leaving out headlights, and fairly careful work this, following the drawing. So the initial stages of putting on colour will mean flat colours or even colours. The blinds were graduated colour. This is not. Paint the blue of the roof. The interior, I think, would be more sort of grey, a grey wash over that. And then the choices are, what are individual figures, what are they wearing, and grey and green seem obvious choices, but the colours would be of the period fairly quiet colours, like ultramarine and ochre again, that sort of tweedy colour, a little bit of green mixed with the green from the awnings, a little bit of blue-grey perhaps, and the odd bit of brighter colour. So this figure here, if I gave him a sort of tweed coloured jacket, since he's not wearing a long coat, and again make it a bit wetter, then that could help granulation. I've got to paint that jacket in and leave the rest of him alone, because if I paint the trousers, for example, that's going to run. But the hat could be slightly different. Bearing in mind that it's next to that green awning, don't want to make it a green hat. So that's the sort of deciding choice. What is the colour going next to? If it's the same colour next to a similar colour, perhaps avoid that. Give him a grey hat, for example. Come back to that. So he's quite a near person. Generally shoes would be black, but they might look more blue-grey in this first instance. He was wearing bicycle clips. Admittedly, the bicycle would probably be black, so that's the same colour as the shoes. Carefully working that into this shape. So the tubing, enclosed chain perhaps, tyre also black, chrome handlebars, so I'm going to leave that white, crossbar, front forks, spindle, tyre. So that's going to cast a shadow on the road, and that will give it some modelling. Do that in a minute. So make the seat a slightly different colour, brownish colour. So that's isolated parts of this. I can't paint everything adjacent. Whatever is adjacent, I can't paint it immediately next to it. This man standing against an orange wall would look better in a bluish hinted coat. So that's not totally improbable that he might have a blue-grey coat. So that's what's determining the choice of colour, really, the use of an opposite colour. So if he was wearing a sort of blue-grey, and if I give him a blue-green hat, don't want to make it too similar to the awning next to it though. So that's just a little bit different, I hope. I've added some red to that green to make this colour. Can't paint his trousers in yet because that's wet. That's whatever's next to it is wet. So I give him perhaps browner looking shoes or green-grey shoes. Again, that's just different from whatever's next to it. I'll come back to perhaps paint the greengrocers, the door to the greengrocers. I might paint green, and that would mean that this lady standing next to the door, I would paint her sort of crimson and ultramarine, crimson and permanent rose rather, with a little ultramarine in the mix. I'll give her a pale red coat. Yeah. You might have gloves on, that would be a little bit different. So these flat colours lack any sort of modelling. I suppose it is quite careful painting, but once the colour has dried, I can work next to it. So I could perhaps give him a respectable pair of darker trousers, dark grey, mixed from ultramarine, ochre and crimson. Make a sort of charcoal grey colour. No modelling on this, so there's no shadow, no texture, no creases, no folds, just a flat colour. So there's more detail to go into this. I'm going to work further onto the variety in colour. First of all, giving each figure a colour that stands out from the background that they're standing against. And this is something you could experiment with by putting a piece of colour, putting a little bit of colour on a piece of paper next to where you're going to paint. This, yeah, sort of another bluish colour there. I don't really want that because I've had quite a lot of blue. Purple. Purple's a colour I haven't had much of. That's purple. Sort of purple colour, something like that. And this figure here could be wearing violet, purple. Violet blue is quite good. So it's a purple, but it's towards blue rather than towards pink. The colour is slightly different. I'm going to paint quite carefully around those handlebars there. It's not really... did the people wear colours like this in this period? Well, perhaps they did, some of them did, but this is a chance to try out colour theory more than it is to be faithful to the colours of that era. Flesh tone would be crimson and yellow ochre. So crimson and yellow ochre, something like that. A good comparison is the back of your hand. Put a little bit of colour on there, then put a finger next to it and see how that comparison goes. So I'm going to paint the whole of the face and head, even though there's hair there. I'm going to paint all of that in the flesh tone, hand also. I'll come back to that later and put the skin tone on top. So even if this lady here with the beehive hairdo has darker hair, then I'm still going to paint this in that skin tone, which is rather similar to the brick tone at first. There's no shadow in this. So I'm going to paint this figure in the same colour. But leave out the headscarf and the glasses. Let's take some of that away. So all watercolour looks a bit strong at first, and that may look a little bit too bright, but it usually dries lighter. This figure here, I'm going to paint him in the same way. Just lift out a little bit if that gets too strong. So that will dry lighter. Let's put this figure in here. Legs. Just lift out a little bit there. So the colours in the other figures, just different from each other. Important that they're not all the same. So ochre and green, we haven't had an ochre-y green because there would have been a lot of tweed around. So green, ochre, that's ochre and ultramarine and cerulean blue. There isn't much of this, but again, slightly different from the other colours. It's not a big amount, not a big area. And if I gave him a sort of buff coloured hat, it's not the same as his jacket. This woman standing next to the car, she could be a dull red also, because that's a difficult colour to place. If I mixed cadmium red and that's more of a red brown, like a burnt sienna, crimson, cadmium red and a little bit of ultramarine, make a sort of reddish brown, and that's just different enough from what's around that figure. The figures that are more distant could be just flat colours, but just more neutral colour. So that's meant to be a blue-grey back there. Some blue-green again, but not quite the same as the... So if they're wearing jackets, then they are going to be different on top compared to trousers. There's a sort of violety one, and there's one that's again just a little bit different. They're meant to be paler, all these colours, but not too warm. But even if you did have a warm colour like a brownish, reddish brown, it would be they run into each other. Yep. Lift that out. Make that a little paler. So they're quieter colours. This pram here in the foreground probably wouldn't be a vibrant colour, wouldn't be a very strong colour, possibly would have been black or something dark. This is a purple grey or a mauve grey, so it's crimson and ultramarine with a little bit of ochre. And if the sort of mudguard things were chrome, then that's leaving out. This is all theoretical and just trying out colour and colour theory. So there has to be some sort of axle thing back here, some sort of suspension. The tyres could be white rubber, they might have rims. There possibly would be a little bit of shadow on this bar. And the hood, that's just yellow ochre on the hood. Very dense colour. Leave a hairline gap there because that's really painting that a bit too soon. Lift out. I want this to be lighter on top. Lifting out there. A bit more lifting out. So it lacks shadow, lacks definition in shadow. Something warmer for this coat, this woman's clothing. I'm going to give that a crimson with a little ochre, but a lot stronger than the brickwork, so that's sort of a terracotta colour, but it's a lot more crimson, rather like burnt sienna, but even a bit brighter than burnt sienna. And other parts of her face and so on, I'm going to wait for that to dry. So there are areas of detail to follow, and that's more time consuming to do, and I'll try and make that in part 6 of this memory lane perspective.